what things we need to look for? What does it look like? You said grooming, but what does that look like so that we can be aware?
There's red flags. You really just need to empower your kids. You have to be very straightforward with them. You can't say inappropriate anymore. Let me an example would be if I was talking to my 12-year-old daughter. If I said, "No, you can't send an inappropriate picture," she would look at me and go, "Okay, I won't send an inappropriate picture."
Right.
So define inappropriate for me.
Be very specific.
Nobody knows what that means. So when you talk to kids, you need to say, "Do not send a naked picture of yourself." And so what you do is you empower kids by saying, this is going to happen, watch for it. When it happens, this is what you do. You can't say stranger danger. You can't say good touch, bad touch.
Right.
So if it's grandpa or if it's a biological father, is that a good touch or a bad touch? And so kids are going, this is my dad, the person I trust more than anybody in the world, and so if he's touching me, that must be a good touch.
Right.
And so you got to go a little bit more. You got to make sure you empower them to know this is your body. Nobody touches your body.
Regardless,
family, friends, neighbors, nobody has a right to touch your body. And there's probably going to be a time that they try to. So when that goes to happen, then they're going, oh, I've heard about this. I know that they shouldn't be doing this.
Right.
And so then they can stop it.
Right.
But still, there's going to be sexual abuse.
Mm-hmm.
And there's going to be sexual abuse in families. And, I feel sorry for parents that come in here and they're so devastated by going, what did I do wrong?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I could see parents taking blame and feeling guilty,
Right.
like I should have protected them, I should have
Right.
known. Especially here in Utah, it seems like families are very integrated. They do everything together. They
Right.
spend every Sunday
Right.
together. They go every holiday together. So
Yeah.
you would think it would be hard for them to admit and be able to see and then want to even believe that somebody in their family would do that.
A lot don't. There's an article in the newspaper today about a little baby that was beaten and died in Salt Lake. And if you hear the mother, she defends the boyfriend who is actually the one that's been accused of killing this little baby. And she said he wouldn't have done that. He couldn't have done that.
Right.
And so a lot of times we see acquaintances or family defend the perpetrators, and that's where you have to be really careful, and we have to be careful to make sure that we support the victim.
Right.
Not support the one that's been accused, because that's tough for a victim to see that and go, wait a minute, this happened to me, so why is everybody supporting that person?
Yeah.
And then to see that happening to other people would make the child feel like they can't speak up because then it's their fault. They did something wrong, and whoever has harmed them is not taken seriously.
Absolutely.
And they feel that they can't, it's not safe for them to say anything.
Well, you think about the consequences of saying stuff, and we're always like, oh, they should just always tell, they should always tell. Mm-hmm. But think of the consequences of that. You have to be pretty tough. You have to be pretty brave. You have to know that if I say that Dad did this, Dad's probably going to jail.
Right.
And so, just like you said, that's one of our biggest challenges, is that this is my fault.
Right.
Because if I wouldn't have said anything,
they wouldn't have gotten
they
in trouble.
Would have gone to
they
trouble.
Would still be here.
And so this is my fault. And the little younger kids, they will do everything they can just to save, somebody from getting in trouble, because they don't want to see that happen. As they get older and they get into their teens and stuff, they worry more about the support component. If Dad goes to jail, how do we live? Who pays for our groceries? Who pays the house? If you got a mother that's not working, that's a big deal.
Wow.
And so when I say 25 other people have been affected, you're not talking. There's a lot of consequences, a lot of fallout, a lot of ripple effect from that, mm-hmm. and it's so damaging to a community to be, to have that happen.
Mm-hmm. Do you see cases that the clients are ever connected? You say within a community, let's say, if it's someone like a church leader that may have access to other kids, do you ever see kids come in afterwards that say, I know that my friend told and I also want to tell?
We have a lot of those. Again, a lot of those are connected through social media. But yeah, we have multiple victims all the time. We've got them going right now in Weber County, where we got the school teacher up in Logan that met 3 different girls down here. And so it's, yeah, we see in fact, that's why we put it out to the media a lot of times.
So they can
this person has been arrested for this, if you know, and then pretty soon we'll get calls going, yeah, my daughter, my son was also involved with him. It happens quite a bit when a teacher's involved and the teacher's the perpetrator. We'll get multiple victims that come in. We've had cases, 10 or 15 victims from one person, and I'm sure there's more than that some just aren't going to come forward because of what you were saying, why, and it's hard, and why should I tell about this? I'm fine, I'll just move on with my life.
Will anyone believe me?
Or would anybody believe me?
Are they actually gonna
I
believe
get
me?
that question frequently by people. Well, how many kids come into the CJC? Well, how many lie?
So let's talk about that. Let's talk about stats of children lying. The likelihood of a child coming in and claiming that someone touched them inappropriately, is that normally something that they do? Do they?
That's pretty much zero.
Right.
Right,
right, because children don't know.
They don't know, and think about it. Think about it this way. For a child to come in and say, I've been sexually abused by an uncle, my brother, the neighbor, what's the motive?
Right, exactly.
Usually kids are very self-centered a little bit at that age, like what's in it for me?
Mm-hmm.
And so for them to come to a CJC, talk about something that's very uncomfortable, why would they do that?
Right.
And the other aspect of that is just like you said, how do they know?
Yeah.
So if I've got a 5-year-old and they're walking in and they're being very specific on sexual activity, and they're describing
bodily actions,
exactly,
maybe, and reactions to
everything
things
that happened, and you're going, well, that's pretty interesting. How'd that 5-year-old know about that?
Right.
And so the only time really that we take a little bit of caution is if there's sometimes if there's a divorce involved. So if you have a pretty nasty divorce going on, and then you have one of the, they're bringing in one of the kids going, dad sexually abused these kids, or mom's beating these kids, now there's a motive. And so we look, but that's why we have trained forensic interviewers, because they can ask the questions and then go, a little bit of coaching going on here.
Right.
If a kid comes in and says, yeah, I was touched on January 23rd, 2017. How many kids talk like that? So if they're that way, then that's a red flag, and so you would look at that. Or they use specific words that are, more words that pertain to a state statute, the words that are used in that law. Then we're a little then we look at that going, okay, there's some coaching going on here, and then we just have to confront the parent and say, what did you tell them to say?
Right.
And we always ask that question at the end. We always say, did anybody tell you to say anything today? And sometimes kids will go, yeah, my mom. So,
shoot.
Yeah, that's why we watch for those things. But really, it's such a low percentage that are divorces like that and stuff. So, kids don't lie about it. They may enhance it a little bit. Kids don't understand dates. They don't understand how many times.
Right.
So you have to take that into account when a 6-year-old comes in and we say, how many times has this happened to you? 1,000 times. Okay, that's reasonable.
Right.
It didn't happen 1,000 times.
You're hoping it didn't happen.
Yeah, we're hoping
times.
it did not happen.
But in their minds, it probably
Sure.
feels like 1,000
Yeah.
times. It probably feels like
Yeah.
it's been happening forever.
Yeah, they can't associate that, and so your interviewers have to know, they know that, and so they have to ask the question in a way that, that it's, not 1,000 times, and so
Right.
you get through that. That's why it's so important that they know how to interview.
Mm-hmm.
And we train. It's expensive. It's hard to get people to training because there's just not enough money available for that.
Right. So tell me, going with training, the children. So they've now come out. They have told. They've gone to court. The person that abused them has now gone to jail or had things happen to them. What about the child now? What about the 5 or the 6-year-old? How do they get over this? How do they move forward?
Depends. Actually, the younger the kids are, the better they do. So if they're under 10, a lot of kids are like, okay, that happened, I'm done with it, I'm not, and they move on. We want to be very careful with the therapy thing. And so we do provide therapy for kids when we believe that they need it. And we can actually do an assessment and say, okay, they're high risk, medium risk. But then we want to make sure that they're getting just the amount of therapy that they need. Mm-hmm. If we're not seeing results from a therapist in 6 weeks, then we're going to start going, okay, what's going on here? We should see some improvements in 6 weeks. So we're very concerned about sending kids to therapists that don't really know what they're doing.
Right, absolutely, yeah.
They have to be trauma-focused, trauma-based therapists,
Mm-hmm.
and we should see some results.
What do you consider results in a child?
Improvement. So we do an assessment, and so when we do the assessment, we'll ask them certain questions. And there's lots of tools out there to do that have been developed by Primary Children's, by Columbia University, by some of the big universities that they've got certain questions that they can ask. Mm-hmm. So they'll ask those questions. It will give us an assessment of where they're at on the therapy scale. Mm-hmm. We put them into therapy for 3 or 4 weeks. We ask those same things again or close to that, and we'll see different answers. And so then we can actually take that and go, big improvement from here to here.
Absolutely.
We're doing a baseline. We're comparing it in 6 to 8 weeks of therapy, and we better see some big improvements, or we're going to change therapists.
Absolutely.
Or we're going to change the way what type of therapy they're getting.
Gotcha. So we've talked about what parents can do to protect their children. Mm-hmm. What else can the community do to help you as an organization? What types of needs do you have? What can we do to make sure that the Children's Justice Center stays around? And I mean, you're obviously a valuable resource to the community and everyone in it. So what can we do for you?
I think one of the things that most people don't understand is when you have an organization like this, we're government based. Mm-hmm. We fall under the state legislature, we fall under the county attorney's office, but that doesn't mean that you have money to run them. Right. That's, yeah. You have a program in place, but most of the time government funding doesn't cover it. Wow. And so you will see things out in the community about supporting not only our organization, but organizations for kids. Mm-hmm. It could be YCC, it could be us, it could be the Christmas Box House down there. And so you realize that only about half of our funding comes from that. Oh, wow. And so the first thing I'd say, if you could get involved in those kind of things and where you're raising money or just attending the events mm-hmm. and supporting the events, mm-hmm. That money comes back, mm-hmm. and a lot of it goes directly to the kids for those services. The other thing I would say is just be aware of what's going on around you. Mm-hmm. When you have kids going to some man's house every day after school, and he's giving those kids gifts, and you got this single man over at the house, and the kids are all over there, that's a red flag. Okay, pay attention to things around you. Pay attention to kids when their attitudes all of a sudden change.
And so that would look like maybe a happy-go-lucky child then turns to, would you say depressed, or what types of personality?
Change of friends.
Okay.
Grades dropping dramatically. Happy-go-lucky kid, and all of a sudden they got an attitude. With littler kids, we see them, sitting in the corner by themselves. We see them afraid of adults. Just general stuff. Don't dismiss that and go, oh, they're just going through a phase. Okay. Because most kids will have a reaction to it, obviously. Right. And the closer to a family member it is, then the more reaction they're going to have. They're not going to want to go to the Christmas party. Right. They're not going to want to go to
Grandpa's
to
house.
Grandpa's house, and
Yeah.
you're like, why? You love Grandpa's house. Well, I don't want to go there anymore.
Okay.
And so you have to ask the questions and dig a little bit and find out what's going on there.